This week on the MHR Show, we're talking about high performance.
I sit down with Andre Devol to talk about high-performing organisations.
And we're joined by two of our experts from the MHR team to discuss our Secrets of High Performance report and what it means for businesses.
Let's get started.
So Andy, you recently had a chat with Andre Devol.
I did, yeah, it was really exciting to have him in. He's joining us for a webinar later this month on high-performing organisations. But as the academic director of the HPO Centre, we sat down and had a chat about what high performance is and why it's so important for businesses to consider.
Let's take a look.
Now, we're joined by Andre Devol, who is joining us for our World of Work webinar series on the topic of high-performing organisations. Andre, thank you for calling in.
Thank you for having me, Andy.
So obviously we're going into more detail with the webinar, but could you give us a quick summary as to why is it so important that we're having a conversation on high performance and what it means for organisations?
Well, the main reason for this, Andy, is that everybody wins when we have more high-performance organizations. Clients are being better served. The happiness of work of our people will increase incredibly, which is very important nowadays with the war for talent, and also society benefits from high performance. And so the more high performance organizations we have, the better it is for us as people and as society.
Amazing. And what do you think are the common mistakes or misconceptions a lot of organizations make when they're trying to become a HPO?
Well, the most common mistakes are probably that we are looking at it, we think it's a matter of changing our structure or organizational structure or getting more resources in, like a completely new IT architecture, etc. And we'll talk about why these are misconceptions. But what I can say now is it's not about stuff, it's about people, and specifically about the mindset of people. If people develop a high performance mindset, they start to work in a different way. They start to cooperate in a different way, which makes that basically everything runs much smoother with less mistakes and with much more enjoyment.
And Andre, a lot of our work has been inspired by the research you've done with the HPO Centre when we've been looking at our Secrets of High Performance report. But could you take us very briefly through your kind of 5 key factors for your HPO framework?
Yeah, the research showed that after we put in a lot of characteristics which might be important to become HPO, based on our data, it showed that eventually there were 35 characteristics which really make the difference. If you strengthen these, your organization will become better and better and better until it's the best in its sector. And these 35 characteristics always appear in 5 factors. And those 5 factors are the quality of management, the quality of employees, openness and action orientation, which is about how you deal with each other in the organization, continuous improvement and renewal, and my personal favorite, the long-term orientation. We're in it for the long haul.
And you mentioned this before, actually, and we'll go into it later in the webinar, but actually, could you expand a bit more on the importance of kind of that long haul, that long-term thinking, and the sustainability element behind high performance?
Yeah, it's also in the definition of HPO, that you are better than your peer group for a longer period of time, because it's like what sports people often say, it's not that difficult to come to get to the top, but it's staying at the top, and that's very, very important. And when you see for an HPO the long-term orientation, one of the main characteristics there is the client is always number one, which is the client is your reason for being. If there was no client, you wouldn't be there. And so whatever you do, you always think, okay, how will this help the client? And the other element there is, which I like very much from this factor, is that your people also stay a long time in the organization. Everybody wants to be in a winning team. And that has incredible advantages, Andy, because if you have knowledgeable people, they know the industry, they know the clients, they know the products, and they have this high performance mindset, it's what the Americans call a double whammy. Very good people, very knowledgeable, very driven. Excellent.
Thank you, Andre. Obviously, we're going to talk about this a lot more anyway, for a lot longer. So I appreciate your preview to the insight you're going to give us on this webinar. Thank you very much. And yeah, obviously, our World of Work webinar on high performance will be happening in March. So if you're interested to find out more, make sure you're signed up. And yeah, thank you very much, Andre.
So Andy, that was a really interesting conversation that you had there with Andre about high performance organisations, and actually it ties in quite nicely with the work that we've been doing this month at MHR talking about high performance, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's our theme of the month of the Telegraph for our World of Work 2050 campaign as we look at where the future of work wants to go. So we've been doing our own research as well. We've just released our Secrets of High Performance report. To tell us more about it are our MHR experts, Emma and Maddie. Thanks for joining us.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
So, the report, Secrets of High Performance, we've just released it. Could you give us a bit of context about why we've done it and why it's so important?
Yeah, so effectively we've surveyed 150 C-suite executive level people and 1,500 knowledge workers across the UK, Ireland, public, private sector, all different kinds of industries, asking them about what high performance means to them, if their organisation, if they feel it's high performing, and how they feel it's best to achieve high performance. And the results are actually, they're not so much surprising. They're things that I think a lot of us kind of knew instinctively, but seeing it just laid out in black and white with these very stark numbers of just how big a contrast there is between those two groups is really quite surprising. I think it's something along the lines of 50% of leaders think their team is high performing, 90% of knowledge workers think their team is high performing. So there's obviously a bit of a disconnect there. And I think a lot of people know that there is often a disconnect between what your leader thinks is high performance and what you think is high performance. But finding out those linking bits that mean that, why that conflict is in place is really interesting. And I think by knowing all that, it means businesses are going to have more material to work with to find out, right, how do we actually become high performing?
So in the report then, what is the disconnect? How do leaders define high performance, and what's the difference between that and how employees would define it?
I think the important thing is that neither group is wrong per se. It is more a case that they have different perspectives. So I think we've all had that situation at work at some point or another where you think you're really smashing it, you're producing great work, you're doing your best, and then you go in for a meeting with your manager and actually you're a bit off base. I think it's happened at some point to everybody. And it's not that you're wrong, you're not performing, it's just that the leader's got a different perspective on what you need to achieve. So they're thinking on maybe a more macro scale on where the business is going as a direction of travel, whereas you're thinking more about you as a person, as an individual. You might maybe have an idea of your direct colleagues, but you maybe don't have that full picture of the entire team, whereas your manager or your business leaders will. But then it also means that your business leaders do need to be able to get into the weeds a little bit with you as an employee and figure out what is it you actually need to become high performing, what space do you need, what tools do you need, all that kind of stuff.
And Maddie, why is that advice, why is this research kind of so important for the markets that we talk to at MHR? We talk to a lot of businesses. The conversation of high performance is something we're trying to push. Why are we doing that?
I mean, I think it's a really prevalent conversation at the moment, and I think the biggest thing is the most successful organisations, and we talked about this in January's topic on the world of work, in that long-term thinking. And if organisations, and this probably also leads back to that disconnect, if organisations are thinking 5, 10, 15 years into the future, they've got that vision and they need to think and put those steps into place. You can't make big changes overnight. A lot of people are now grappling with how they change that with what's happening kind of economically, environmentally in our current market conditions. But that employee level is very much looking at the here and now. What work do I need to do this week? What work do I need to do next week? And I think it comes back to one of those pillars that we cover in the report, one of the 10 pillars, is really getting that shared vision and goals piece together. Leaders really need to start communicating more. And in a business perspective, leaders need to be able to communicate, why am I asking you to do that? What is the impact going to be? How do I make change and add value, both in terms of there is that financial element that always will be, but what about the business growth? What about trying to make sure employees are feeling empowered to be able to really feel like they're adding value? So then you sort your retention and your recruitment problems, because at the moment there are so many organisations that are struggling to recruit. It's a major problem at the moment. They're struggling to retain. And part of that dates all the way back to the pandemic, which now feels quite some time ago in people have got different expectations at work.
Yeah. And that ties nicely back into what Andre was talking about earlier, and what he'll talk to us later is high performance is not just about process, but it's about people, and it's about how it ties together. And his definition of high performance being that of sustainable long-term growth. So it's hard to become high performing, but it's even harder to stay high performing. And it's about that, again, linking it back to that long-term thinking is vital. So I know at MHR, we're trying to drive this conversation of high performance. I know we're trying to jump in it ourselves. So Emma, the report gives us some kind of key pillars of kind of outputs, discussion points. Could you take us through what they're saying?
Yeah, so building off of Andre's work as well, there are, I think, 10 key pillars to work with. Some of the most important ones are, as Maddie said, goal setting. If you're not working towards a very clear and obvious point, everyone's going to be going off in different directions. Someone's going to go this way, someone's going to go that way, and you'll never quite gel together. Yeah. So setting that, but then also communicating that effectively. It's not just, we need to generate more revenue. It's like, well, how? What is the goal there? What is that? We're going to use that revenue to make the business better. Likewise, it's enabling space for people to innovate, to feel safe to take risks. You cannot really achieve high performance by just sort of coasting on what's always kind of worked. There always needs to be space to take that chance, take that jump, and find new ways of doing things.
Well, I think we actually have the 10 points from the report actually that we can show here on the screen actually. So this is taken directly from our report. I'll open it to the group. What are our thoughts on these as top tips for businesses to take away?
So one of the things that's really interesting for me is when we've broken down the data within that report, there is a gendered split, and there's a real difference between male and female leaders when it comes to where they might focus out of these 10. Now, we know all 10 are important, but many of our female leaders scored things like giving people empowerment, that employee engagement, that culture of learning and growth as not the most important, but the ones they really focus on to get high performance from their teams. Whereas a lot of the male leaders focus a lot more heavily on the kind of risk and innovation. Now, a good leader needs to be able to use all of these to get the best out of their team, to be high performing. They're all really important. But I think what's really interesting is perhaps some of the old stereotypes, some of the old gender biases are creeping in and really creating a bit of a disconnect between male and female leaders in where they're focusing most of their time and what they see as the most important. And I think for organisations to really be high performing, we need to break that down, get everybody to understand when to use the right pillar, if you will, at the right time in the right situation to get the best out of the people.
So actually that's really interesting, the sort of gender divide and the divide between leaders and employees. If people want to dig a little deeper into the numbers and into the research, where can they go to find the report?
So there's obviously our full research report that really digs into this divide between employees and leaders effectively, and that's available on the MHR website. Following on from that, you can also dig into our practical guide, which is where we set out like some key tips. So ideas of how do I become high performing? It's not just this nebulous idea. Here's some real steps that you can take to just get started straight away. We also do have our gender report where we talk a little bit more in depth about what Maddie touched on there, about the divides between male leaders and female leaders and where there might be a little bit more work to bring those into balance. Yeah. And all of them set out just ways that you can start thinking about this and bring those conversations to the rest of your team. So they're really good reads.
Amazing. Thank you both for talking about that. I think high performance this is the start of our conversation that will be continuing about the year. As we as an organisation, we're going to look at what high performance means for us, but also we want to have that conversation with businesses come to us to talk about how they want to drive high performance. So we'll no doubt have you back to talk about this as we review it later in the year. So thank you very much all. Obviously, as the team have said, all our resources are on the Knowledge Hub, and we will be joined by Andre de Waal again in the studio for a webinar on high performance. So we're really looking forward to that.
Thank you everyone for tuning in this week. What are we talking about next week, Andy?
Well, next week we'll be back even quicker with a spring statement special. So we'll be here with our legislation team to talk about that and unpack it as it happens. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, bye-bye.